Hello and welcome to episode 87 of the Synergen Leadership Podcast. For those of you listening for the first time, my name is Julian Carl and I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Synergen Group. I'm passionate about all things leadership and management, so passionate in fact that I decided to start a podcast about it. And here we are in season 2, and my purpose for the podcast continues to be the same, to raise the standard of leadership. So in today's show, I speak with Troy McKinna, who is the author of Brand Hustle, 4 Critical Foundations to Accelerate Growth. Troy believes in the power of building brands because brands connect products and services with consumers. Brands strengthen P&Ls and drive growth. Brands attract the best talent, and brands provide a beacon in a sea of choice. At Agents of Spring, Troy builds brands by creating disruptive, consumer-led products and services by leveraging the creative problem-solving framework. He helps organizations curiously seek out and creatively solve their customers' most valuable problems. Problems that once solved create value for both consumers and organizations. The problems that motivate customers to pay brands to solve. As a startup entrepreneur and co-founder of Quest Beverages, he practices what he believes and inspired by the journey of building the Calm and Stormy brand from nothing. A brand with a mission, healthier people living on a healthier planet. So now during the course of the conversation, we explore his book in detail. I start off by asking Troy why did he decide to write the book. We speak about how brand contributes to the financial success of an organisation. We discuss why it's important to understand the problem you are solving for your customers. And I finish the interview by asking Troy about how brands stand out and then deliver. So keep listening, and as always, really like to hear your thoughts about the interview with Troy McKinna, author of Brand Hustle, 4 Critical Foundations to Accelerate Brand Growth. Happy listening.
Welcome to the Synergen Leadership Podcast with Julian Carl. Julian returns in 2019 with weekly conversations with leaders and authors from Australia and around the world, giving you the opportunity to share in their journey and learn from their expertise and knowledge. Julian also shares some of the tools and techniques he uses as a leader, mentor, and facilitator, helping you to build your leadership capability and improve your confidence as a leader.
So welcome, Troy, to the Synergen Leadership Podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time to be a part of it so that the listeners have a bit of an idea of who you are. Who is Troy McKinna?
Well, thanks for having me, firstly. So I am a brand building expert. Been building brands for multinationals, working on huge global brands, startup brands, you name it, working for companies, consulting to companies, doing it for myself in a startup business. And so I've sort of spent 20 years building that expertise around how to grow a brand, basically. And so that's sort of my day job.
Okay. So we're here to talk about your book, Brand Hustle, the 4 Critical Foundations to Accelerate Brand Growth. Why did you decide to write this book?
There's probably a couple of career experiences I've had that have been really contrasting. And I guess what I'm seeing more and more of in business is that companies don't understand the value of their brand and are not really doing their brands a great service, and therefore leaving growth opportunities. They're missing them basically. So I used to work at Mars, amazing family-owned business, amazing brands, and had the experience of growing some brands. Some old brands like Mars and Snickers, getting sort of really good growth on them, or I had the opportunity to relaunch Pods, a little wafer snack, and doubled the brand in 12 months, tripled it in a couple of short years later, and just saw the power of getting your branding right and everything that goes with that. And then in contrast, I worked at Schweppes. It was a big business, lots of factories, and a lot of it became factory-led. And so we had amazing brands like Cotties, for example, Cotties Cordial, and I just saw it getting declining year on year, and the investment wasn't going into it, and lots of short-term decisions made that weren't doing the brand justice. And so I look at that and think, it was, the business was doing okay and it was hitting targets each year, but it was getting harder and harder each year. And I just thought, there's lots of that going on in business. Everyone's getting very short-term focused and not really doing their brands justice. And so I guess I really wanted to uncover what it takes to grow a brand and sort of make brand building sexy again, because I think marketing's losing its voice. Brands are sort of taken for granted, and I just wanted to get them back on the agenda. Okay.
Great. And for the listeners out there who are wondering why we're talking about marketing on a leadership podcast, here's my logic. My logic is that every leader has a responsibility for, protecting a brand and understanding the brand. And I think that we can all impact it and support it in certain ways, whatever level of leadership you're on. So I want to start with a bit of an excerpt from your introduction, which resonated with me. So Matt cut quickly to the chase. I would like to offer you the role of marketing manager for the Mars brand. Congratulations. Hang on, I thought. This role wasn't on my list. To say I was pumped is an understatement. I was going to be moving from the smallest brand in the portfolio to the company's flagship brand. Played it cool, let me think about it overnight. There was nothing to think about. This was an amazing opportunity. I didn't realise it at the time, but my marketing career was going to be forever different. Within a few days, it was evident that this was going to be a huge job, fast-paced, high-pressured. The Mars brand performance was critical to health of the business and performance of the business, and it was the biggest profit driver. So I wanted to ask you about that. How did it feel getting that offer as a leader?
Great. It was rewarding in that I'd spent the previous 12 months working on pods, as I just mentioned, and so took a lot of risks and was really doing a lot in isolation because no one really cared whether it was successful or not. And so I went from working with a really small team and impacting a small part of the business to getting this opportunity to be a big leader within the business and make some big decisions, and everything scaled up basically from there. So it was really rewarding, and it was sort of that moment of nervous excitement around, what am I going to do? This brand's been around for a long time. What am I going to be able to do to impact that? And so, it was great. And I think the other thing is it's such an iconic brand. So it's, there's only some certain things you can and can't do with the brand. So, it was lots that came with that. But excitement would be a huge part of that feeling.
Did you feel as though it was a huge jump in role? Because I often find some of the leaders we work with can be a little bit worried about that next step that's too big for them. Did you feel that at all?
Oh, definitely. I definitely feel like it's a big step. My old man's always given me the advice of bite off more than you can chew and chew like buggery, which I love that sort of sentiment. And I think I got advice at the time, which was really good, which was what's got you here is not going to get you there, which is, working on pods, you can make decisions in isolation. You only have to influence a couple of people and, you can sort of bulldozer some stuff through the business. When you're working on a brand like Mars, you can't make decisions in isolation because what you does affects lots of parts of the business, and you need to take lots of people on that journey. And equally, you sort of play a big role in getting the business excited. So, thousands of people turn up to work every day. It's like, how do you sort of put a bit of a spring in their step with what we're doing on the big brand? So I definitely, there was a nervousness to it, but I'm very much the view of put me in the deep end and let's go for it. And, it's sort of that learning curve for those first 6 months was huge. Yeah.
And it's obviously paid off for you.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. As I said, I've never looked back from there. I've had great opportunities since then, and, a lot of it to do with the fact that I, worked on that brand.
Okay. So I want to start digging deep into your book, and because I think there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I want to explore this idea that you talk about the 4 Ps of a lost soul. So what are these 4 Ps of a lost soul?
Well, I think anyone that's read marketing books for the last 20 or 30 years or even longer, there's the 4 Ps of marketing, which is the product, price, the place, and the promotion. And if you read, I went through university a long time ago, but historically marketing has influenced those 4 big levers of the business, and they're really the big growth drivers for a business. But what's happened is marketing has lost its voice over time, and what a marketer used to influence is nowhere near what a lot of companies a marketer does influence now. And so I guess marketing's a bit of a lost soul in that it's parts of its job have been taken by product teams or tech teams or the supply chain are making decisions, or in some cases you'll see marketers are either product marketers and pricing does someone else does that, and sales do the place and where it's sold. So it's sort of been split up, but I guess that's back to the reason I wrote the book was just feel like marketing's a bit of a lost soul at the moment, and if you ask people what marketing is, you'll get 10 different definitions, and it's a bit of an ambiguous statement in today's age.
I was doing an interview, an earlier interview on the podcast, and the person I was interviewing was had the view that leading a sales team was very different to leading sort of just a general type team. Do you think that applies to marketing, that trying to lead a marketing team has its own sort of nuances and challenges?
Yeah, definitely. I think the challenge with marketing, and I've worked with lots of marketers over the years and managed lots of marketers, because the role, a proper pure marketing role, has lots of dimensions to it. It can be very analytical, it can be very creative, it can be very out-front leadership, it can be very behind-the-scenes strategic thinking. And so the people that get attracted to the role and the people that succeed in the role can be very different. And so I think you've got to understand that. And, very rarely do you see someone that's the full package within a marketing type role. So you've got to nurture that and get the best out of people. And a lot of the success I've had managing teams has been about development of people. How do you give them an opportunity to make a big TV campaign versus, work with a supply chain to get a new product to market versus, engage a sales team and, retail customers on that. So I think there's definitely lots of nuances. Generally, they're smaller teams. The sales team can be, most places will be a lot bigger than the marketing team. So you've got those factors going on as well.
Oh, so aren't they quite often called the Make It Pretty team? Is that?
Yeah, the colouring in department. Yeah, so they get lots of derogatory terms get slung at the marketing team. But I think it's been interesting. A colleague who's a CEO of a sort of mid-sized business read my book, and he said, I'm sure you wrote it for marketers, but he said it applies a lot to finance teams or supply teams. Should read it because understand what marketing is actually trying to achieve, because a lot of it is behind the scenes and not really uncovered. So there's lots more to it than just colouring in. Yeah.
You also talk about this idea of being under pressure to perform. So how'd you handle the pressure to perform?
And so I talk about that in the book, in that early on when I was working on small brands, it was just me. There's not that much pressure. You feel like you're under pressure, but really in the scheme of life and business, you're not really under much. And as you work on the bigger brands, when I worked on Mars, the way I dealt with it is I just worked a lot longer hours. I was doing long days. I had no kids at the time, so you can afford to do that. And you basically just got through it by, rolling up my sleeves and working harder. I think when you get into leadership roles where it Schweppes had a team of 40 people and, basically had meetings all day, every day. And, you get to a point where you've basically got to get involved in the decisions you need to be and let other people make the smaller decisions and, prioritise your time and prioritise your decision making. And I think the biggest tension for marketing is that a lot of the conversation and the frame of reference is 1, 2, 3, 5 years out, whereas most businesses are thinking about this quarter's number or this year's number. And so you're sort of dealing with that tension as well as, that's great that you want to do that in 2 years' time, but what's happening today and how are we going to hit our sales number today?
Page 35. You asked a question, which the reason it stuck with me is that we asked this question in our feedback. It's all about the Net Promoter Score. So how likely is it that you would recommend our company / product service to a friend or colleague? What do you think about the Net Promoter Score? Is it a good thing, bad thing? What do you really think?
Oh, look, I think it's an okay thing. I think what it does is, it's very simple and people can get their head around, and it's an easy way for businesses to measure how they're tracking. What it lacks is the real detail of why people buy a product or service or a company. And we've done it. We've worked with a client, huge established organisation, institution, been around forever, the best premium sort of offer in the market, and its Net Promoter Score was the best of all its competitors. But it was losing business. It was actually declining, and people were going to another institution, and the reason they were doing that was because this other place was more state-of-the-art, more innovative, more, get you a better result, basically. And so while the incumbent had a really good Net Promoter Score, it hid the real fact of why people were buying the category, which is they wanted innovation and state-of-the-art and progressive and moving forward. So it's sort of, there's a layer behind it. And so I guess it's what's the real decision making? What's the real need that people are buying for? And, like I give the example as well of Nike. Nike's a great company. I definitely recommend it to people. But I also run, and so I don't run in Nike shoes because they're not the best thing for my foot. And so if someone asked me to recommend a shoe, I'd say New Balance is probably a better running shoe. But, it's not to say that Nike's not a great company. It's a great company and definitely recommend it. But, horses for courses, it's not the best thing if you want to go running, in my mind. So, yeah.
You talk about this idea of science versus art. I often think what we do in training is a little bit like that. So when you say that, what do you mean?
Yeah, so I guess in building a brand, there's all the human behavior and the psychology and just the fundamentals of how brands grow. And then there's all the artistic side to that is, the creatively, how do you engage people? And so I guess you need to be able to straddle both and do both. The best analogy is architecture. So there's science to, there's gravity. You need the walls got to keep the roof up and all that sort of stuff. So there's all this science you need to understand in designing a house. But then there's an artistic side to it, which is how do you work within those constraints and, make it look amazing and, have a warmth and functionality to it. And so it's the same with branding. There's certain structure around how a brand will grow. How many customers you bring in and how you price and all that sort of stuff. But you've actually got to creatively engage them, people to do that. And so you need sort of both sides of those spectrums.
You make the point that brand value makes a fundamental difference to the financial success of your company. I was actually doing some work earlier this week, and it was quite interesting that some of the conversations with the people in that room were that when they were out in the marketplace, people thought they weren't around anymore because there was no brand visibility of them. So what can we really do, and what can an everyday leader do to really start to contribute towards the brand value?
Yeah, so I think the starting point is you've got to really put yourselves in the shoes of your customers. And, it's very rare to find someone these days that's got lots of time and sit around just, making, putting in lots of decision making into whatever they're going to buy, purchase, etc. So what happens is people make split-second decisions on what they're going to buy. It's obviously different if you're buying a house or something like that. But even cars, there's over 300 models of cars in Australia, and the average person buys a new car and considers 5 at sort of most. And so not many brands are getting considered or products. And so what happens is your brain sort of does this, it's version of Google search. And basically, I need to buy, new shoes. What are all the brands that come to mind, or the first 2 or 3 that come to mind? And that's what happens in most categories. It's 2 or 3 considerations. As I said, a car is 5. It's a big ticket item, and so you've got to make it easy for people to think of you in that buying moment, because they're not going to go through to the 2nd or 3rd page of Google search. They're not going to go into the detail. They're not going to run big spreadsheets around, all the factors that play in it. They're going to use a gut feel and go, I think, here's a couple of brands I consider. Yep, I'm happy with them. Let's go. And so it's much quicker decision making. So you've got to consider that. And I think that's, for companies and leaders, it's about how do you make sure your brand's, memorable, easier to think of in that buying moment, and easy to purchase. So they don't have to sort of shop around too much to find you.
Is it a case of wearing the potential customer down? Because I was thinking about, I like MasterChef, and through product placement and through one of the guys they have on there, they're all about, there's a Cobram Estate olive oil, and it's been a constant throughout the season this year. So as a result, I think the next time I'm going to buy olive oil, I don't normally buy that brand, I'm going to try that brand. But I was wondering, is it just because they've worn me down and that I'm seeing it every time? Is that the way it works?
Definitely you can have that scenario where they just keep tapping away at it. I mean, the biggest brands are still the ones that have generally been around the longest, and they've been doing it consistently for a long time. But Cobram Estate in that example, they've been pretty safe. They're putting olive oil on MasterChef and, lots of people watching it. And so it's not really controversial or unique or, memorable. It's pretty safe bet, I guess. Yep. Some companies can do it, something much more remarkable and sort of hit you between the eyes with just one or two experiences with it, and therefore make it more memorable. So it's just around, how much you punch through all the noise and the clutter that's going on to stand out.
Interesting. Because I think this is important for small businesses in particular to really think about, because they don't have the big budgets. So they need to think about how can they start to build that awareness. And there's your point there about doing something controversial or doing something safe. Yeah. Would small businesses tend to lean towards something a bit more controversial?
They definitely have the opportunity to do that. I think for small business, a lot of small businesses ended up on, Google search or, Facebook or Instagram, those sort of worlds. I think what a lot of businesses find is you think, I'm just going to buy an audience and bring it in. But I think what a lot of companies find is the competition for that search word that's important to them is often more expensive, makes it more expensive than they get a direct return out of that. So you can't necessarily buy your way to an audience, and it's harder, as I talked about. It takes a bit more creativity and a bit more consideration, but it's a more sustainable format if you can find a way to get your message out there without having to buy every single eyeball every single time.
Interesting. So you're right about this idea that building brand value is a journey, not a destination. So is that a trap that a lot of people that engage you, that's where they start thinking, it's just a destination, I'll get to here and then that's it?
Yeah, you hear it in big business all the time, which is we've got a really strong brand. And it's like, yeah, sure, you might have a really strong brand. It might have been historically really strong as well, but it doesn't mean you can't lose that strength. Just because you've got it 1 year doesn't mean it's going to continue to be strong. It's something you have to keep investing in. I use in the book the example of the Holden Commodore. 20 years ago, it was the number one brand in Australia. They sold 90,000 cars every year. It was by far the most dominant car in Australia. Now they sell about 10% of what they used to, and it's nowhere near number one, and it's obviously not made in Australia anymore, and there's a really big risk that it's going to disappear from our roads altogether. And so they fell into that trap of, we're a strong brand, we don't have to evolve too much. So all this other, changes in consumer needs, changes in other competitors, and they just didn't move fast enough, and so they disappeared. And I think a lot of big business fall into that, which is we're strong, we've got a strong brand, we don't need to keep topping it up. For small business, I guess it's less likely to fall into that trap, but it's definitely marketing and building a brand is not just about we've got a great logo, we've got a great sign on the front of our building, or we've got a great website. You've got to, the brand actually sits in the customer's mind, and it's what they think about you. So, that's something you've got to keep topping up and continually invest in.
Yeah. So you asked the readers of your book to answer a series of questions about being around, are you responsible for a thriving brand? Some of the questions like, do you set the pace for your competitors follow? Is your product best in class? Things like that. I'm curious to know what can leaders at all different levels of a business do to make sure they're contributing towards that idea of a thriving brand?
I guess it's depending on what function you play in the role in the business. It's understanding what part of that helps build the brand. For your customers, it's any touch point. So if you're running the call center and people are calling you up, and people get a shit experience calling up your call center, that's part of the brand, and that part of the business is doing a disservice to the brand. So you got to make sure that everyone's talking from the same hymn sheet, and it's consistent across. So I guess it's understanding what part of the puzzle you play within that, and then I think the best organisations are really clear what their brand stands for and stands against, and often you'll find someone at the front of that that's the business, the founder or the leader or the CEO that's made it really clear, this is what we do and this is what we don't do, and what the brand's about. And so then any part of the business can understand their role in helping fulfill that.
In part 2 of your book, you really started to, I think, give people a really, really good framework that they can start to use to really think about these issues. Are you able to give sort of the listeners the high-level overview of your 4-step framework?
Yeah, sure. So there's 4 foundations. They sort of interconnect in that the best place to start is with step 1, which is what customer problem do you solve? Customers are trying to get somewhere. They have a need, they have an aspiration, but often there's something getting in the way of them getting there. So there's a problem, there's a tension point there. And so it's about understanding that, because that's their motivation to go and buy something to solve it. And so first step is understand the problem you're solving for them. The second is about, what's the solution you offer? What are the features and the benefits that are really going to be meaningful and motivating to the customer for them to go, yep, I understand that. That's exactly what I need. Here's my money. Take it now. And so this is about articulating stuff in a language that resonates with people. And the example I use is Snickers, another brand I've worked on. It's packed full of peanuts, so I get what the feature is. It really satisfies. I'm really clear what the benefit is. That's memorable. It's really succinct. They could get into lots of detail around. It's got 22% nuts, and that gives you 8% protein, and it's going to make you feel fuller for longer, and all this sort of detail. But you don't remember that, and so it's just about articulating that solution in a way that resonates. It's a language I understand. I'm not a nutritionist or a scientific person. I just give it to me simply, and so it's about understanding your audience, and the better you understand the customer problem from that first step, the better you can articulate your solution. The next part is about selling experiences. And so this is about how do you make it more than a price conversation? Lots of companies, I see it all the time, all the way from restaurants into big business. They'll have at the front half price, or we're $10, come and get a $10 steak night, or whatever it is. And they're leading with price, thinking that customers just want cheap stuff. Customers definitely at times want cheap stuff. Other times they want a real experience. And so the benefit of, if you want to build a brand, the benefit of selling an experience is that it makes it much more memorable, and you can, make it richer and make it stick in their head. And so it's, I guess, a part of that. Step 3. The last step is about making your brand memorable. So how do you make it stick? So that, as I said, in that split-second moment, people go, yep, that's the brand I think of. Makes it easy. I walk into the store, it's there. It's an easy transaction. So this is about what's your message, what's your tone of voice, and how do you do it consistently, and what's your platform to get that, make those memories strong. And so, how do you get your message out there? Is it podcasts? Is it billboards? Is it TV? Is it word of mouth? How do you make your brand memorable, and how do you consistently get it out there? Because as we talked about, those memories are fragile. So if you're not continually topping them up, they'll disappear.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot on. I see it a lot on my LinkedIn feed. People talking about the need on LinkedIn to be consistent. Yeah. If you're using LinkedIn as a platform for sharing whatever your message is. Yeah. Because I think you're right. There's so much new stuff coming in that before you know it, you've forgotten, and the new kid on the block is in front of you.
Yeah, definitely.
So I really liked your point about understanding your customer problem, and you talk about that in as a way of unlocking growth for your organisation. So how do you recommend people go out and have that conversation with their customer about what really is your problem?
Yeah, definitely. It's about getting as close to that moment they're experiencing, that need and that problem, and just immersing yourself in it. Often it's hard for people, for lots of products, it's hard for people to articulate what's going on or what they need or whatever they are, because some people just get used to what they do all the time. And so you want to get in there and really understand what they're going through in the using that product or service, and how they're buying and all that sort of stuff. We've done stuff, for example, with tech, and you get on, you can ask people what they think of a website or an app or a feature or whatever, and they can tell you. And it's not until you get on there and, they do funny things, like they'll save different tabs open, or they'll click a certain path, and you go, why are you doing that? And it's like, that's so I can remember where I am, or, like there's frustrations that they're going through that they probably can't articulate. And so you need to be in that moment. There's a book I love called Small Data, and Martin Lindstrom talks about getting into people's homes and, and really understanding, frustrations. And we do we'll go into people's homes, open their fridge door and just see what's in there, or pantries, or, you really get into it. As I said, the internet stuff, going through search histories, obviously sharing that you're going to do that, but really getting in to see what they've been up to and what they're doing. Because it's, lots of research for companies has defaulted to using focus groups, but it's a bit artificial. Strangers sitting around a table in a sterile room with a glass mirror, and, they're saying what they think you want to hear. They're not really being honest and transparent, and part of it is they don't always know what they go through, because it's just normal for them. So the richer stuff is definitely close to the moment. We've done work where we're working on some running gear. We've gone out and interviewed people while we're running, and so you get into that. You get right into the moment, and you can experience what they're experiencing, see what they're doing. We were talking about the chafing and stuff. That's all stuff that you need to be there in that moment to experience it and hear it. So, get as close as you can to the action is the advice.
Okay. I was particularly interested in this point because my industry is relatively competitive, where you talk about competitor advantage lies in being able to uncover or see what others haven't. So how do you foster that type of approach?
Yeah, it's about curiosity, and it's about sort of, just being really curious. And I think a part of it is, as well, in lots of industries, you end up, people have a lot of assumptions built into the way they do things, and they think there's a certain way to approach something, and it just becomes the norm. Like it's the norm. It's the sort of way things have always been done. So why shouldn't we do it that way? And I think what you find in most companies, in most industries, is it's someone that's never been in the industry that comes and disrupts it, because they come in like a novice. They ask lots of silly questions, but they learn a lot more. And so they can uncover stuff that never, other people haven't done, because they're just having a different view of things. Most companies are all, you're looking at companies across industry, most people are following the same blogs, reading the same, journals, newspapers, magazines, whatever it is, going to the same places for inspiration, and they end up with all the same fuel, I guess, for their business. And so that's why it all looks the same. Whereas, as I said, it's the one that comes in that's a bit left field. And why are you doing that? Really uncovering what's the motivating asset behind that. And so, I think that's the best opportunity, is get back to your customer, and because ultimately they're your boss. They're the ones that pay you, and they're the ones that make or break your business. Yeah.
I thought it was relevant to keeping on with the idea of customer, where you talk about how important it is to keep bringing yourself back to the fact that consumers pay brands to solve their problems for them. How do we know that we haven't lost sight of what those problems are that our customers are looking for us to solve?
It's a good question. I don't know if it's always that easy, because disruption is by definition sort of someone coming left field and doing something that's never been thought of. But if you're selling a product or a service, I guess it's about understanding from the customer's point of view, what's that competitive set? Is there companies that are doing something quite different that solves the same problem for them? And I guess it's customers' jobs that they need doing often are solved by more than you think your industry is, and it's broader than you think it is. So, again, I use chocolate bars as an example. We always thought Snickers was the hunger, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, get you through to dinner type moment. But, that can be solved by chips. That can be solved by, muesli bars, piece of fruit. And so your competitive set's a lot broader than you actually really think. We always thought it was, Mars and Boost and, other Kit Kat and stuff like that. And so, I guess if you put yourself in your customer's shoes, see what else they're buying, you can then understand, well, is someone in the muesli bar category going to do something that's better solving that 3 o'clock afternoon sort of pick me up, get me through to dinner?
So it's really trying to step out of your own bias of what you do and try to step into that customer view and look at what else they could purchase instead of you.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think a lot of companies will go, we sell product X, we sell widgets. But what the customer's actually buying is the benefit of that. And so you need to understand what are they trying to solve and what's the benefit they're trying to buy. Because there's lots of different ways to solve that.
Yeah, so it's that idea of they're not buying the drill bit, they're buying the hole.
Exactly. Yeah. And Seth Godin talks a lot about this. You know, they're buying the whole, but they're also buying the picture frame hanging on the wall, and they're buying the warmth that comes with that. And so you can ladder that up a long way. There's, you know, they don't necessarily need the hole. They might just use those 3M little hooks that stick on the wall. So the problem can be solved a lot broader and a lot more laterally than you consider in a lot of cases.
Mm. So you talk about this idea of the sweet spot. So what's the sweet spot we should be looking for?
So I guess for companies, particularly in solving problems, you're trying to identify something that's really valuable to the customer, but you're also trying to find something that's going to be profitable for the business. You can do really well by the customer and service them really well, but they may not actually pay you enough to cover your costs. And likewise, you can do something really profitable as a business, but it might not be that valuable to the customer that they go, yeah, there's lots of demand for that. And so it's about finding that intersection between the two. So, customers are going to be happy and your shareholders are going to be happy at the end of that. It's connecting those two parts.
Okay. And I was in Perth this week, and I was talking about to the group that I was training. I was talking to them about this idea of customer value. You talk about needing to share the value. How do we go about sharing the value?
John Mars had a really good perspective on this, which is you need to make profits to sustain as a business. But if you get to a point where you're making too much profit and gouging the customer too much, it opens up the door that someone else can come underneath you and do something better and cheaper and more satisfying to the customer. So it's finding that happy medium where it's valuable for the customer and valuable for the business, but you're not giving away too much of your profits, but equally you're not taking too much from the customer, because that opens up opportunities for other people to come in underneath.
I want to talk about products because this resonated with me, because I think I might occasionally be a little bit guilty of falling in love with a product or service that we've developed. And you talk about this idea of creating fit-for-purpose products. Can we explore that a little?
And so that's about potentially offering a range of products or services, sometimes people are going to want to come and have the best experience and all the bells and whistles, and it's about designing the right product for that moment. Other times they just want something quick, cheap, and just get me in and out, and let's be done with it. And so it's sort of meeting that. I guess what I find in most industries, you have a real spectrum of routes to market. There can be very price value driven areas of the market where people want the cheapest. They just want something basic and be done with it. And other times they want something amazing, fully curated experience. So I use wine as a great analogy here. Sometimes it's Tuesday night and you go to the local pizza joint and you just want the house red. Just give me a glass of the house red. They're not really caring about, does it taste like Grange? And it's fit for purpose. It's Tuesday night. I don't want to spend too much money. I just want to come in, have a quick pizza and wash it down. Other times they're having a dinner party and they want the full backstory, or they've gone to a cellar door and they want to really get into the moment. They've got the whole afternoon to really just relax and have a glass of wine. And so they want to get into, where is it grown? Tell me, the winemaker come and tell me how long it's been in the barrel and all that sort of stuff. And so what you sell that person that moment can be much more extravagant and sophisticated, and you can charge them more for it. On Tuesday night at your local pizza shop, they're not going to pay $80 for a bottle of red. They just want a glass of red, for $6 or $7, something that's really, achievable. So I think, wine's obviously a simple one to talk about, but most industries have it. The big, the Bunnings or the Coles and Woolies that you walk in, you're getting something cheap because they've got lots of it, and it's discounted at half price. versus going to amazing bottle shop or cellar door, as I talked about, where the experience is much richer. And so as a company that's selling to those different channels, it's about what's the high volume, most efficient product we can make that we can sell a bit cheaper. What's something that's got a bit more richness and backstory and product and features that that we can offer to them.
Okay. Got me thinking about our product suite now. I'm thinking, which one's our glass red, which one's the really nice.
Yeah, and so we have it in Agents of Spring, where we deal with big business, and so you can go in and you can put lots of time into the project, and you can charge them a decent price, and it's all acceptable. We have that same conversation with a startup, and they just fall off their chair when we start talking about the numbers because they just can't afford it, and which is fair enough. I run my own startup. You get tired on stuff, and so it's like what's the full service experience versus what's the in this case, go and read the book. Go and buy the book for $35. Read the book, or go and read some articles, or listen to a podcast, or how do you offer it in a way that's more accessible for a different audience?
Mm-hmm. You also write about this idea an experience lasts a lifetime. How do brands go about making these experiences?
Yeah, well, I guess it's a thinking about engaging more than one sense. I guess what are they hearing? What are they seeing? What's the touch like? What's the smell? And so if you engage, and science is really clear on this, if you engage more than one sense, it's more memorable. And so that's really what you're trying to do. Back to the sales example of walking into Coles and Woolies to get my dinner at night. It's not that great an experience. It's pretty boring, not that memorable. Versus going to a farmer's market to go and buy your dinner party, food. It's a totally different experience, much more memorable. Back to the wine analogy, you can probably tell me the last vineyard you went to and what the brand was, and tell me all experience. You probably can't tell me what the house red was on Tuesday night at the pizza shop, or what you bought from the $2 bin at the the bottle shop. So it's about adding more richness to it, because that makes it more memorable, and that's the best brands that have done that are doing that really well. Again, I'll talk about 4 Pillars Gin in the book, and they've done an amazing experience of working with the best bartenders in Australia, the best restaurants, to make a really great gin and tonic, and it's much more memorable. And that's how they're going about building their brand. Is every single time someone has a gin and tonic, they want it to be the best, and that makes it more memorable for them.
Yeah. Talking about that, it makes me think of what Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman are doing with their coffee and gin, like they're having goes at each other and pretending to make ads about each other, and it's all humorous, but I think it's all actually doing that thing. It's just their way to make that memorable.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. You talk about the need to stand out and deliver. How do we make sure that we're standing out and delivering?
This is about just not being boring. The average person in a city is exposed to about 5,000 messages a day. There's a very small fraction of that they can actually remember. It's not that question of what's the great ad you've seen recently. People struggle with that question because not a lot of it kicks through and really hits you between the eyes and is memorable. And what you'll find in any industry is there's lots of cliches. The beer guys talk about it. A beer ad's got to have 4 guys joking around, at the pub, and they have the back shot of a beer and, glowing sort of golden colour coming through. And every beer ad for decades was made like that. And then, the guys like Carlton Draft did the big ad, and it's not what you expect from it, from a beer ad. And so it cuts through. But every single industry's got it. Lots of fashion, food and beverage products and household products have got the same. If you look through car ads for SUVs, they're all the same. It's a family, it's sporty, and there's stuff, there's a dog and all this sort of stuff. It's very cliche. What happens is people just, it just becomes very generic for them, and they've seen it before, so they sort of switch off. Again, Seth Godin talks about it as the purple cow. You're driving along the road and, you see a cow. The first time you see it, go, great, I saw a cow. Then you keep going along and they're just cow after cow after cow after cow. And you go, I don't notice them anymore. And then, he talks about the purple cow. If you're driving along and see a black and white cow and you keep seeing them, they all become generic. Then all of a sudden you see a purple cow, you go, wow, there's a purple cow. And then same thing. If you keep driving along and see purple cows, they all become very generic. But that's the point, is making something a bit more interesting and a bit more standout and distinct, so that it's memorable and when people see it.
Yeah, and I actually think that's got some real relevance to career-focused leaders in terms of how they brand themselves and what they're doing to stand out. If there's 4 leaders in line for the promotion, how they stand out to as the first and only choice for the next promotion.
Yeah, and often I've done lots of hiring, and it's people come in with a CV and they'll go, I've done. I did study this at university and did this entry-level job and worked my way up and did this and this, and they're all the same. But often it's the someone that's has got a hobby, an artistic skill they're doing, or they're playing the guitar or something in left field, or they've done a 5 or 10 years in one particular channel of industry as a career, but then they jumped into something totally different, and just the diversity that comes from that experience, that makes it more interesting. So you definitely, there's lots of ways you can stand out as a leader. If everyone's walking in blue suits and white shirts and a red tie, it's pretty easy how to stand out in that sort of environment.
You write about the need to make decisions and then understand the consequences that come with those decisions, and I think it's something, again, very, very relevant to leaders. How do people start to look at decision making and consequence in your view?
Yeah, there's definitely trade-offs to everything you do. Particularly when you're building a brand, but in a leadership example, like, again, I'll sort of get back to really tangible products. If you want to add more products, benefits and features to what you're offering, that's going to come with the consequence of more cost. If you don't understand that, the fact that you're bringing more cost to it, you're probably not aware you're going to have to charge more for it. And if you need to charge more for it, there's probably going to be less demand for it. Or you're going to have to find a way to get it to market that people are happy with that price. And so they sort of all, particularly when you're thinking about really tangible products, there's always knock-on effects. If you want to offer it in 15 different colours, it's going to add more complexity to your supply chain. And you need to be aware of that. Most businesses are profitable and successful because they're efficient at doing something really easily and something really consistent and doing it time and time again, and that's how they make the money. If you want to start adding more complexity to that and more, trying to service more customers, more tailored products, you need a back of house office that can help achieve that. And so it's just understanding all of those knock-on effects. You can't be sort of the cheapest and the most sophisticated and the best quality all at the same time.
It's about finding your spot, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So are there any books or people or leaders that inspire you?
Definitely. When I wrote Brand Hustle, there were lots of books I kept going back to. In a marketing world, there's scientific books around things like How Brands Grow, written by academics out of South Australia, but very it's not the most entertaining book, but it's the fundamentals you need to know. I mentioned before Small Data by Martin Lindstrom. Love the richness of those stories, him getting into houses and just really getting in, and there's a really interesting story to a lot of it. But from a marketing sense, you sort of need both those sides to it. So I'm involved with my startup business. I'm involved in is Calm and Stormy, sparkling mineral water and still water in aluminium cans, most sustainable packaging format you can get. And this is sort of trying to sort of resolve some of the ills of me selling a lot of plastic when I was at Schweppes. But a very sustainable business. But one of our real inspirations we draw on is Patagonia. And so the leader behind that wrote a book called Let My People Surf. And so it's an amazing book about how he's trying to set up his business for doing good for the environment and the world, as well as sort of being a profitable ongoing business. So, find him fascinating as a leader. There's lots of books out there. I'm reading one at the moment called Made to Stick. And so just really gets into, how do you make messages stick, which I think is a fascinating thing. And I guess it links closely to a lot of what I do.
Now, if people want to know more about the work that you do, where should they go to find you? What should they look for?
Online it's of agentsofspring.com is our website. There's sort of lots of the detail about the service we offer. We do all the way from what's that customer problem and what's that need you're trying to solve and the problem you're trying to solve, through to ideating and coming up with creative ideas, through to prototyping and through to helping get it to market. So you can see more there. I guess that's the main point. You can catch me on LinkedIn as another place to find me as well, and just see a bit about what we're up to. I share a lot of articles on there of stuff I'm writing and stuff that's going through my head as a way of getting it out there.
Okay, got to ask, where'd you come up with the name Agents of Spring? Where did that come from?
It came to me in the shower, but we, I guess there's two parts to our business. One is the investigative side. How do you sort of find the problem, which is where the agent came in, sort of secret agent, sort of ninja type approach. And we always want to use all of that insight to come up with growth ideas. So spring was sort of the season of renewal and growth, and so sort of merging of those two ideas, uncovering what's going on and how do you use that for growth.
Okay, so any last words on brand and leadership?
Definitely. I think it's easy in big or even sort of medium-sized businesses to say we've got a marketing person, they look after the brand. My message to all leaders is that you all look after the brand. If you're a CEO and you want to grow a business, you need to understand a brand and how it grows. You look at the likes of Steve Jobs and what he did with Apple. It's a really big, obvious case study, but he made the most amazing products, but he built a brand, and he was really strong at building that brand and understanding what Apple was, and that's why they're valuable. They're not valuable because of the supply chain they've got or all that sort of stuff. They make great products, but they can charge a lot more than Samsung, and they've done it there. They pushed the boundaries. So, if you want to grow a business organically, you need to understand how to grow a brand. If you just want to buy your way, you can get the finance guy to help you buy other companies and sort of buy your way to growth. But that would be my message: is that brands are a source of growth, and if you can understand how they grow, then you can really grow your business.
Well, on that note, Troy, thank you so much for being on the Synergy Leadership Podcast.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Well, that wraps up episode 87 of the Synergy Leadership Podcast, another great author interview episode for you. I'd like to encourage you to head on over to the Synergy Group website and engage in the conversation with us. Tell us what you liked about the episode, tell us who you'd like us to interview, or tell us what sort of content you'd like us to deliver to. And if you are an iPhone user, please feel free, head on over to the Apple site and leave us a review. In next week's episode, we have another great author interview for you where I speak with Shane Hatton, who is the author of Lead the Room, Communicate a Message That Counts in Moments That Matter. It's another great author interview. Till then, love to hear what you think and happy listening.